You're listening to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm John Donnison, live in London. Now, for some, I'm the towering genius. For others, I am the devil incarnate. So wrote the Middle Eastern scholar Bernard Lewis, who has died at the age of 101. Lewis profoundly influenced Western views of the region, writing more than 30 books and hundreds of articles. His opinions were popular with neoconservative politicians in the United States, but he faced criticism from other Middle Eastern scholars, most notably Edward Said, for promoting what they saw as an elitist and interventionist Western view of the region. Well, Martin Kramer was the founding president of Shalom College in Jerusalem, where he teaches the modern history of the Middle East. When did he first meet Bernard Lewis?
I first met him in 1976. I was a 22-year-old graduate student at Princeton. He was already 60. There were two full generations between us. I was in his class, and my impression was that I was standing opposite a very formidable scholar indeed, someone with a global reputation in an era when there were still iron curtains and all kinds of barriers. Bernard had a truly global reputation, and he took me on as a research assistant, and I would sit in his office after hours and on weekends, and came to appreciate the vast scope of his connections, both in the Middle East, in Europe, in America, and on the other side of various divides. So my impression was of a man of towering stature.
And his early life, he was born in London, educated at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and then went on to become a spook, an intelligence officer.
He did during the Second World War. He was initially recruited into the tank corps. He would later say that he had no aptitude for tanks, only ineptitude. And as a result, he moved over. And spook is, of course, a pejorative word, I suppose. But he did deal in intelligence, and he had a particular gift for languages. He commanded all of the Middle Eastern languages, Arabic, Persian, Turkish, as well as, of course, the major research languages of Europe. So this gave him a particular advantage in intelligence work.
And where did that work take him?
I think it took him across the Middle East. He was in Egypt. He was in Palestine. I think he touched down in Iraq and some other places. So he got to see the region. He had seen the region already in the 1930s as a student, but of course this was a war, very different circumstances in His Majesty's service at the time. And I think it gave him a taste for contemporary affairs because he had been schooled in medieval Islamic history. And this was his first introduction to contemporary affairs, and he took a liking to it. And he always balanced his subsequent career between history and the present tense.
Now, he was undoubtedly a controversial figure. I think he wrote, "For some, I'm the towering genius. For others, I'm the devil incarnate." I think I know where you stand.
Well, I don't think there's any question. I think he was actually probably unique in his range and erudition when it came to the study of the Middle East. He was involved in a number of controversies, no question about it. One of them related to Orientalism and the claim that Oriental scholarship in the West was somehow tilted against Islam. Lewis, I think, maintained quite rightly that the true nature of Western scholarship was that it broke medieval prejudice in Europe against Islam and put the study of Islam on a sound basis of the reading of texts and Islamic sources. But I think that Lewis made a very good case that Orientalism was actually a step along the line of progress towards better mutual understanding. And I think that his arguments have come to prevail more and more as we move past the polemics of the late 20th century.
Well, some of his arguments, I mean, he was a strong supporter of the Iraq War, close with Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, a lot of the neocons. He got that wrong, didn't he?
Well, I think here we have to go and look at the deeper origins of that. Bernard was a liberal. He wanted to see the triumph of democracy. He had participated in the war, seen the defeat of Germany in the Second World War. He thought that victory would be incomplete if democracy didn't spread. So Bernard was looking for a place in the Arab world which could be democratized. He didn't influence the Bush administration. The Bush administration had decided to move on Saddam Hussein, but they recruited him, and so did some Iraqi opponents of Saddam Hussein, who recruited him also, persuading him that democracy had a chance. Look, I think the jury is still out. One might say that his hope for democracy in the Arab world was misplaced. But then we had the Arab Spring. And just the other day, we had elections in Iraq. So who knows?
Martin Kramer, a former student of the Middle Eastern scholar Bernard Lewis, who has died aged 101.